In this tutorial, I'll be walking you through how to quickly make music visuals in Blender using my new Mr. MIDIman add-on. We're going to take this simple scene I made and animate it like this in just a few minutes. So if you don't know how to make MIDI files, it's super quick and easy. I made a separate tutorial for that. It's on my YouTube channel, and I'll also throw the link in the description. Just for your reference, here's what the MIDI files look like in FL Studio. We have one for the kick and the bongos. We've got one for the snares and one for the dubstep stabs and the bongos as well. So to find the add-on, you're going to open up the 3D viewport and just press N. You're going to find it here on the side. So the way this add-on works is with channels. Channels is just another name for an empty object that the add-on creates in this MIDIman channels collection. So whenever you press new channel, it's going to create a new empty object in this collection. And this empty object is just located at the origin of your scene. So I'm going to delete all of these extras. So the way to move between channels in the add-on is selecting this drop down and just clicking on the one you want. If you click on the outliner over here, it will not switch between empties. So to load a MIDI file in the channel, you've got this file path right here. So the first thing I'm going to do is open up my MIDI for the kick and the bongos, and I'm going to connect that to an emission material on this center ring right here. So I click this folder icon, I'm going to navigate to my MIDI. I'm going to select kicks and bongos. Okay, now we have it loaded in. It's kind of going to look like nothing happened, and that's because it created keyframes on this empty, and we don't have the empty selected right now. So in the graph editor here, we don't see anything. So I'm going to click highlight channel here. That's going to highlight the channel in the outliner, and that way we can see the keyframes here. So most of these settings are self-explanatory. We have start frame, which shifts the start of the MIDI in case your audio doesn't start on frame 1. We've got attack, which just changes the distance between the start of the MIDI note and the peak. We've got hold, how many frames that the value holds for. We have decay, how long it takes to get back to the base value, peak value, and base value. All these values update the keyframes in real time, so you usually don't need to press this create keyframes button, but if it doesn't update, you can press this button as a backup. So for this MIDI keyframer section right here, all the keyframes that the add-on adds are added to the Z location of the empty. So you'll see here, object transformation, Z location. Okay, so to link this MIDI channel to the emission material of this bottom object right here, there's two things we can do. We can either copy and paste out these keyframes, but I often prefer the approach. If you don't need to change the keyframes, I just like to copy and paste this driver. So I'm going to right click on this output right here and do copy as new driver. So I'm going to go to emission center and I'm going to right click and do paste driver. Now you're going to see if I go to the render view here, it's going to light up when the kicks hit. And of course in this MIDI I've got the bongos as well, so that's why it's lighting up on the bongos. So it's easy as that. I might change the decay a little bit, make it a little bit longer here. Other than that, that's the first step done. So to rename channels, you can't rename it within the add-on itself, but you can rename it over here in the outliner. So I'm going to go kick, center light. So the next thing I want to show you is the accumulator functionality. First, I'm going to create a new channel. We're going to make the center cube rotate on the kicks. I'm just going to rename this for organization. I'm going to load up just the kicks, not the kick and the bongos. So what this accumulator section does, it takes the output of this MIDI keyframer section, so these keyframes right here, and it creates a cumulative running total of the values. And it's kind of hard to explain. It's easier just to show by example. So first thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to set these values up a little bit better for this functionality. Let's do attack of 2. Okay, so when I click create accumulation here, what it's going to do is create a custom property on this empty. You can see it exists right here. So if we open up the keyframes, let's just normalize it. So as you can see here, on every kick hit, this value increases according to this curve we've created in the MIDI keyframer section. So right now I have the base rate set to 0. That means that if there's no value from the MIDI keyframer section, if there's no value from these other keyframes, then it's just going to stay at a constant rate. The influence value is how much these other keyframes will affect the curve. So if I turn off normalize and I just increase this influence to 2, create accumulation, you can see it's going to have a more pronounced effect. It's going to change the value more. So back to this base rate, you can see that it's constant here in this section. If I change this to something like 0.1, then we'll do 0.5 just to make it more pronounced. You can see that this value, when the kick is not hitting, is constantly increasing. So I'm going to show you an example of how you can use this. I'm going to set the base rate to 0.05, the influence to 0.2. I don't need 1,000 frames, so we're just going to make it the length of the animation here and create accumulation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this as driver. I'm going to go to my cube in the middle here and just paste the driver on the rotation. Now you're going to see that the kick will be rotating according to this curve we've created. So a little tip with this, you can see that the add-on creates a keyframe on every frame, and this isn't nice to work with if you want to edit these curves a little bit. So what you can do is highlight all the keyframes, go key, density, decimate ratio, and then just drag it to a point where you feel it's nice. And there we got some nicer keyframes to work with. One thing to note is if you hit create accumulation again, it's going to undo this decimation you've done. So if you're doing decimation, I'd recommend copying and pasting out these keyframes onto the value you're trying to change. Okay, so right now we have this. The next thing I want to do is link each one of these emission materials on these rings to kind of the fast dubstep stabs that we have going. And that's going to use this MIDI splitter functionality here. So I'm going to create a new channel. I'm going to call this stabs rings. I'm going to load up my stabs MIDI and I'm going to change the attack to 1. Let's do a decay of 8, peak value of 3, base value of 0. So right now, the keyframes it creates are for every single MIDI note. But what I want to do is split up these MIDI notes into 4 different channels so I can connect each one to a separate ring light so it kind of alternates between them. That's what this MIDI splitter section is good for. So I have 4 rings, so I'm going to set the number of splits to 4. I'm going to hit create split channels. So it creates a custom property for every split channel we just made. And you can see down here, it alternates between each channel. So split 1 is on the first dubstep stab, split 2 is on the second, split 3 is on the third, split 4 is on the fourth, and then it goes back to 1. So I'm going to connect these as drivers to the materials on these rings, and we'll see the results. The shortcut for copying and pasting as driver is you right click and press N, and then to paste it, you can right click and press P. So I'm going to copy this one, copy 3. Okay, so now let's see the result. So you can see it's alternating on every MIDI hit between these different rings here. The randomized splits functionality is, instead of if you want it to go sequentially 1, 2, 3, 4, it'll randomize which split is hit next. So to show you that, I'm just going to hit randomize splits. I'm going to hit create split channels to regenerate the keyframes. Now we'll see. So it's going randomly between each one, but I'm going to keep it as sequential for this animation. So real quick, I'm just going to make the size of the cube increase when the snare hits. So I'm going to create a new channel, call this snare size, load up the snare MIDI. I want the base value to be 1 because I want the cube to have a size of 1 initially. And then the peak value I'm going to set to 1.5. So I'm going to copy this as new driver. I'm going to paste this on the cube here. Okay, so I'm going to show the extent of how many splits you can do with the MIDI splitter. You can set this up to 16, but I'm going to do 8. What I want to do is on those same stabs in the song that are linked to these ring lights, instead of doing 4, I'm going to do 8, and I'm going to have it cycle between these emission materials on this wall. So you'll see what happens when I do that. So I'm going to do new, I'm gonna call this stabs wall. I'm gonna load up the stabs here, set the base value to 0, peak value to 3, 8 splits, create split channels. Now it's just a matter of copying, pasting each one of these splits as drivers to my wall materials. So I'm gonna do that real quick. Okay, now let's see the result. Okay, cool. Now, one thing you might find when you're animating using this add-on is you want a little bit more control over the keyframes that it creates. And one thing that I've added to help with that is this timeline markers. So you can create timeline markers for any channel to help guide any custom animations you're doing. So I'm just gonna go back to the kick center light. These are kicks and the bongos, and I'm gonna create markers for these. Now you can see on every MIDI note, it creates a timeline marker that you can animate around. And I can do this for as many channels as I want to. And then to delete the markers, you just need to go back to the channel that you created the markers with and hit delete markers. Okay, so I'm just gonna do a couple more things to finish off this animation. The first thing I'm gonna do is I'm going to change the camera focal length based on the stabs of the song. So I'm gonna go new channel, we'll call it camera, or we'll call it stabs focal length. I'm gonna load up my stabs and bongo. I'm gonna set the decay to 3, and then these base and peak values I'm gonna set according to how my camera is currently set up. So if we check the camera, my focal length is 16.3. So my base value will be 16.3, and I want this to go back to maybe 16. I'm gonna copy as new driver and then paste driver. Let's see how that looks. You can see we kind of have this like camera shake sort of effect on these stabs. And then the next thing I'm gonna do real quick is I've got this empty that the camera is connected to, that if I rotate the empty, the camera rotates around. So I'm gonna have the camera rotate around the scene according to the stabs as well. So I'm gonna do new channel, stabs, cam rotate. My MIDI is already loaded in here. I'm gonna set this base value to 0, peak value to 1. And I'm gonna use the accumulator for this. So I'm gonna have the base rate to be 0, influence to be 0.05, end frame to be end frame of my animation, create accumulation, copy as new driver, and we're just gonna paste that. Now you can see the camera's rotating around according to the music here. So the one feature that I didn't show in this example scene is split by pitch. What this does is it splits up the MIDI file into unique pitches that it identifies. So for example, I created this MIDI file right here where it's got notes C, C sharp, D, D sharp, and they kind of alternate. If I load that file into my add-on here, first you can see that it's just creating an envelope on every MIDI note. But if we go down to split by pitch and do create split channels, we're gonna get a separate custom property for every note in the MIDI file. So we have the C notes, C sharp notes, D notes, D sharp notes.